Hi there. Welcome back to the Real Film Chronicles podcast. As always, I'm Nathan.
And I'm Brian.
And in today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at a little film called The Batman. Or should I say, in today's episode, we're going to be taking a little look at a film called The Batman.
Oh my goodness. 100% right. I'm glad we had a little Batman show up to do that introduction for us here.
I am the night. I am vengeance.
He does get called vengeance quite a bit in this movie. Eh? Like it wasn't just like a throwaway line at the beginning. But The Batman 2022, how many years or how far did this movie get pushed back due to the pandemic? Was this supposed to come out in 2021 or 2020? Do you recall?
Yeah, it was definitely, I want to say 2020, but maybe it was 2021. Definitely got pushed back a couple times. The due date got pushed back,
Yeah.
I think. Not due date. So it wasn't a baby, but like the release date, I meant to say, got pushed back quite a bit due to the pandemic. So I think fans of Batman and fans of comic book / superhero movies in general have been waiting for this for a little bit longer than they had initially anticipated.
Without a doubt.
Although, considering that we just got off the Ben Affleck's version of the Batman, a couple of years ago. I guess we can't say that Batman fans have been waiting too long to see Batman on screen again. So
right,
it's all relative,
it's just,
I guess.
I feel like it's going to be a pretty steady stream of Batman films, and it's kind of nice knowing, or maybe it's not nice. I mean, some people are opposed to sort of rebooting series and characters, but personally, I'm a fan of having a version of Batman. And then a few years later, we get a different version of Batman, and it's like, I'm all up for it. It's just more Batman films, and we get more interesting takes on things. But I should introduce the movie here.
Yes.
In his second year of fighting crime, Batman uncovers corruption in Gotham City that connects to his own family while facing a serial killer known as the Riddler. This is directed by Matt Reeves, starring quite a few famous faces.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, Robert Pattinson as Batman, Bruce Wayne, Zoe Kravitz, Paul Dano, Jeffrey Wright, John Turturro, Peter Sarsgaard, Andy Serkis, and Colin Farrell. And I mean, the list goes on from there, but that's sort of your main cast there. Are you a fan of some Matt Reeves' other films? He's done a couple of the Planet of the Apes movies, like the newer ones that came out. He did Cloverfield, which definitely one of my favorites. And that's kind of all that I recognize. And supposedly they gave him a whole trilogy, I think, to work with here, right?
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm assuming that just because it's Batman and it's one of the most popular superhero characters of all time, that they're just a trilogy is kind of like a foregone conclusion at this point.
Yeah.
But in terms of Matt Reeves, yeah, the Planet of the Apes trilogy is what really put him on my radar. He didn't direct the first one, right? Or did he direct the first one?
I don't. Let me double check here, but no, he did Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and War of the Planet of the Apes.
Probably explains why the first one there. What was the first one again? Rise of the Planet
Rise
of the
of the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, that's my least favorite of the trilogy. But when Matt Reeves took over and did the two sequels there,
Yeah.
they really blew my mind. Like I was not expecting that level of quality of filmmaking. After I saw those and like the special effects, and then just like, yeah, it's like just really, really well done movies. And that's why I was super excited for to see what Reeves was going to do with the Batman.
Yeah, because Planet of the Apes, I'm kind of expecting a bit of a cash in, like on a big budget cash in to make these Hollywood films. And we get not only those great special effects, but we get some pretty decent story and like some great character work in Caesar, right? Really, really interesting.
I was really surprised. Like I was more emotionally connected to those apes than I am to a lot of other like human characters in most modern blockbusters.
It's true. And then we have the Batman. I mean, this is hotly anticipated. Like this, people were really looking forward to this film. Were you pretty amped for this?
Yeah. So to put it in context, I mean, Batman has always been one of my favorite superheroes. Growing up with Tim Burton's version of the Batman, and then Batman the Animated Series, it was even more kind of ingrained in me. And then like Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy is still, I hold that up as like a high water mark.
For sure.
for movies in general, but also for specifically comic book movies, I'll use the Dark Knight trilogy as like my benchmark for evaluating other superhero movies.
It's pretty fair to say we've been spoiled by Batman content. I mean, and I'm happy you brought up the animated series from the 90s. That really defined what I expect kind of out of Batman. It's like that made me a Batman fan for life, probably.
Yeah, were you hotly anticipating this? Like, where does Batman rank in your favorite superheroes? I know Spider-Man's on top for you for favorite superheroes.
Spider-Man, yeah, definitely Spider-Man is way up there. Batman for sure. I mean, if you were to do a count of all my old comics from when I was younger, I probably have like Spider-Man is number one in pure issue count, and then it probably goes to Batman. But the big factor for Batman, which is my graphic novel and trade paperback collection, and even going into stores, you can see like Batman comics probably make up 20% of my entire trade paperback collection, because some of the stories are so iconic and so like they're immortal. They're going to live forever, and they're so interesting. And it's been really neat seeing all the popular films dip into each and every single one for their inspiration. And it's like, no, if you've read some of those original ones, you can see that poking through. I mean, obviously in this movie, obviously in the Nolan Batman movies, and maybe a little less so with the Schumacher Batman. But I think it's fair to say that I grew up with the Adam West Batman from the 60s as well, right? I think, Sunday
Definitely an
afternoons,
influence,
watching that with my dad, and we would still watch episodes every so often.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing the original Batman movie with Adam West probably before I saw the Tim Burton Batman. So it's like, can I say that we're like born at this perfect time to like really consume all Batman media, like really, really well? But in terms of anticipation, I find myself getting less excited for these big tentpole releases as I get a bit older, just maybe because I've seen so much of it before. And I mean, we've had the Nolan Batman not that long ago, and then we have Ben Affleck's Batman in the Snyderverse, and I can appreciate that turnout as well. And it's like, I'm just kind of accustomed to seeing Batman movies now. I don't know.
Yeah, and like you said too, like I was never a huge comic book collector, and as I got to be an adult, it just made more sense. The trade paperback route just made more sense instead of collecting individual comics, because like honestly, where do you start? But I would say also like the bulk of my trade paperbacks that I have, it's mostly Batman stories.
Right. Can you think of a couple like offhand that you'd go back to regularly?
Oh yeah, like The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller is just a phenomenal story in and of itself. That whole kind of trilogy, I guess, the Batman Year, or loosely a trilogy, I guess, like Batman Year One, and then The Dark Knight Returns.
It's kind of like Miller's
Dark
trilogy
Knight
of
Strikes
stuff,
Back, I think, is the third one.
Yeah,
which for me the Strikes Back is kind of the redheaded stepchild, I guess. It's not quite as good as the other ones, but it's really neat to go through and read.
It came out like a couple decades after the previous Miller entries, so it doesn't have like kind of that same edge to it. It's like Miller, I don't want to say like he lost a little bit of credibility with that, but definitely the more 80s Miller is kind of like him at his peak doing Batman, like Year One, Dark Knight, really, really good stories. And maybe a little more modern for me, like The Long Halloween and Dark Victory.
Right.
I find myself rereading those every couple of years.
Hush?
Hush, I think I read that once.
Okay.
I haven't gone back to it, but I think that's a popular one as well. And then there was stuff like Court of Owls, which is a little more recent. And by recent, I'm probably talking like 10 years ago, because I think that was a new 52 DC event. But I kind of thought maybe watching some of the previews for the Batman that this was going to be a little bit of Court of Owls activity going on here, where it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
But I think that probably the secret society that's kind of like secretly running Gotham probably plays too close to the Nolan Batman, which used the Ra's al Ghul kind of trying to destroy Gotham, was like that secret society trying to destroy them, right?
Sort of. I would have liked, I mean, we'll get into, I get the nitty gritty of kind of what we liked and what we didn't like and where we sat with the Batman film. But like, I felt like Court of Owls, that would have been a really neat take, and to take the Batman movie someplace really different instead of someplace that we've really seen before.
Yeah.
You want to start off with overall impressions, or maybe like go into like what we liked about the film and then what we didn't like, and then kind of.
Yeah, I would love to start off with our overall impression of the movie. I mean, we're not into spoilers yet, so that's good. Like, what do you walk away with thinking of this film?
Yeah, listen. So this was really the first movie that I went to see, kind of in a post-COVID world. I did go to see Shang-Chi it was like a work, kind of like employee appreciation event. So I did go to see, but that didn't really count. It was like,
Yeah.
I had to go watch this. So the Batman was really the first time I went with my son. And so for me, it was like this is a great experience to be able to go to a theater to see a new Batman movie on the big screen and share that with my son, like my parents had, shared with me. And honestly, like in terms of overall experience, I don't think it was a perfect movie, but watching the movie there, and maybe it was partially that sharing that experience with my son. I was like, I had a grin on my face a lot of the time, like watching some of this, like there's certain scenes are just like, it was just like a ton of fun to watch Batmaning it up on the big screen in that environment, in that time, in that place with my son. But overall, I enjoyed it. Although I thought there were kind of a few key flaws that kept it from achieving, maybe the iconic status that so many people have been. Listen, I think audience reactions have been overwhelmingly positive, and people calling this like the definitive Batman and like the best Batman movie ever. And I'm not quite with that crowd yet. Where do you stand? What was your overall impression of the Batman?
Yeah, like you said, the theater experience for this was absolutely lit up. It was a lot of fun. And I think it was kind of nice going in and watching a movie that is Batman like through and through, because we haven't gone back since the Nolan trilogy. The Ben Affleck Batman, he is a very shared universe, like right from the beginning. Like Batman v Superman. It's 3.5 hours of him sharing the screen. It's a very different take on Batman, like in a different part of his superhero career. And it was kind of fun going back to a more raw Batman experience. Like I really enjoyed that it's, quote unquote, a second year being Batman. Yeah. He might be a little rough around the edges, but just to have him in his own title again was a lot of fun. There was a lot of great moments in this movie, a lot of really fun cinematography and characters on screen. Like you said, I'm like at the edge of my seat for most of this movie. I'm having a ton of fun. And this one, I actually remembered to wear my watch that does my heart rate. And after walking out of the movie, I unsilence my phone and my watch, and it comes up that your heart rate got a little high for doing absolutely, just for sitting there. You might want to look into that. It's like, I wonder if I should line that up with some of the scenes in the movie to see what really got me excited, right? But no, it was a ton of fun. I had a blast watching this film, and I think I rated it highly as a result there.
Yeah, so you want to kind of start digging into this and see, like, maybe we'll start with like the good parts of this, what we really liked about this. I'll start off with the positive.
Yeah, what was the main positive takeaway for you on this?
Well, let me just pull up my notes for Batman. I prepare.
Yeah. It's kind of funny when I was revisiting this last night. Like I rewatched it for now that it's on streaming. Yeah. Rewatching this, and it's just like I'm watching it with a little more of a critical eye, and I think more of my notes were a little negative. That took away from the film a little bit, but also just kind of poking at the movie a little bit. These are bits that I don't really care about too much.
Like I'm gonna poke some holes here a little bit, but overall is like you might think that I don't like the movie, but like overall I really did like the movie. But I thought it was like good but not great. Maybe that's the best way.
Yeah, maybe a little disclaimer. We're going to get into spoilers from here on out. It might sound pretty negative, but I guarantee you we're probably both going to rate this pretty highly. Not to preempt what you're going to talk about in your positivity, but I mean, how do we talk about Batman without the villain? I mean, Batman movies have historically mostly been about the villains. Like you go back to Burns' Batman, it was really about the Joker and Jack Nicholson. Batman Returns is really about Catwoman and the Penguin. Yeah. How did you feel about the Riddler here, played by Paul Dano? Was this guy incredible, or did it not work for you?
Paul Dano's performance was great. Yeah. And there were certain elements of the character that were great. One of the things I really liked about the Batman was the obvious influences that Matt Reeves was pulling from, specifically of David Fincher movies.
Yeah.
You could really see, especially specifically, I'm talking about like Seven and Zodiac, right?
Mhm.
Like you could like the overall atmosphere, which again, like Matt Reeves did an amazing job, and the cinematographer whose name escapes me at the moment, but did an amazing job setting up the atmosphere of the film. And just like Seven, it's constantly raining.
Yeah.
Until like the very end, right? So you get that, just like everything feels oppressive and dark, very Batman-esque. But the Riddler was obviously had components of the character John Doe from Seven.
Yeah.
I mean, they even had, when they found his apartment, even had like the stacks of journals. It was almost an identical scene from Seven.
Yeah, I kind of thought when I first saw that, I was just like, did the Seven like apartment they rented or whatever with all those journals, was it still available for this movie?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess after John Doe, spoilers, died in Seven, the Riddler rented his apartment out, I guess. But then also the Zodiac killer from Zodiac, or I guess the Zodiac killer from real life, with all the, obviously the Riddler symbol there, it looked very kind of Zodiac-esque, and then he was leaving all those codes behind, which if you looked at that, the pages of like all the symbols, and if you looked at the actual notes left by the real life Zodiac killer or the Zodiac killer in the movie Zodiac, I'm saying Zodiac way more often than I thought I would ever say Zodiac. Obvious parallels there, which was really, I liked that. It was one of the things I liked, but it was also one of the things I didn't like.
Did it help to add like that to the sort of like the realism of the movie? Do you think that like benefited the film?
Well, I like what they did with the Riddler and made the Riddler an actual, because like if you look at a lot of the other media where the Riddler has appeared, like he was never a really credible villain. If you try to transpose him into like the Batman, it's obviously trying to do a little bit like the Nolan Dark Knight trilogy, where it's like kind of be more grounded and in the real world. But also paying homage to, I think, the 1989 Batman, Tim Burton Batman, where it's like, it doesn't feel it's not explaining every little gadget and everything. It's just like, here's Batman and he's got his stuff and that's just the way it is. So there's a mix kind of going on there, but it's by and large, like it's supposed to be a very, very grounded feel. And the Riddler as a serial killer, all of a sudden the Riddler, this is the first time I've ever seen a story with the Riddler where seemed like a credible threat and like an actual danger to to Batman or to anybody else, right?
Like in my experience, the Riddler was always kind of a side character, especially in a lot of the comics. Like he was there kind of antagonizing Batman, but he was a little more jokey, and especially because the riddles themselves will kind of be humorous. He didn't really seem that much of a threat. And most notably, I'm more familiar with the Riddler through the Arkham games, like Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, where he's very much part of the background, just throwing clues around town, right?
So I did like that he came off as unhinged and this kind of, he was a serial killer, but he was this force in the darkness. Like, yeah, it was really scary. What I didn't like about the Riddler was when they hewed too close to Ledger's Joker, I found in certain elements of his performance.
Okay.
I think that Ledger's performance as the Joker in The Dark Knight is still hanging large over the Batman mythos.
Yeah.
And I feel like Paul Dano Paul Dano did an amazing job. Truly, like you get the sense that this character is unhinged and there's something not quite right with him. But when that interrogation scene, which was a great scene in and of itself, but I think he was channeling Ledger's Joker just a little bit too much. And I think that's one of the kind of underlying issues I had with the movie, is that there was this border between inspiration and imitation. And I think it's a razor's edge. And I think that a couple times the movie fell off a little bit on the side of imitation as opposed to the inspiration side, right?
Yeah.
But overall, the Riddler was like, it was a really, really good villain that really fit in Matt Reeves' world.
Yeah. No, I really liked his introduction there when he's basically kind of a voyeur looking at the mayor in his apartment. And then we cut to inside the mayor's apartment and he's watching TV. And as he steps away, you see like the silhouette of the Joker. It's like, you don't necessarily know, sorry, not the Joker, the Riddler. You got me thinking of the Joker here, right? And it's just like, oh, he's just this ominous, mysterious figure in the back. And he just goes absolutely ham with like that first murder. It's like, this is a very Like
Yeah,
this is a maniac here, and he's very imposing on
I like
in those
that
scenes.
the murder wasn't clean. It was very kind of rough. It was emotional for him. You could
Yeah,
tell he was breathing heavy afterward, and that's what made it unsettling. Is like how kind of realistic that was. Like because like you look at a lot of violence in movies and TV shows, and it's so clean and sanitized. And in the Batman, unfortunately, like it gets a little bit sanitized too at some points. But like that
yeah,
first scene, it's so like messy and
yeah.
disturbing. It's like
It's raw.
it's raw, and it's like, yeah, that murder was like, yeah, like that looked like it was. I felt unsettled watching that. I'll say
Yeah.
that.
Can I just say that there were a few moments in my rewatch where the Riddler, like Paul Dano, is monologuing a few times, and he reaches different heights, and he's his character's going to different places, and I felt like I could hear Jeff Bridges, like he was channeling Jeff Bridges in a few of these scenes, and if that just kept me on this track of, man, wouldn't an older Riddler be interesting? Where it's Jeff Bridges doing,
Being Jeff Bridges.
just being Jeff Bridges, right? Just a really angry dude, and it's just I don't know. It was just a little
That's
side
awesome.
part when I was watching. I was just like, oh, I wonder if he took some inspiration from some of
Well, like he was already the villain. He was Obadiah Stane in Iron Man, right? Just have him be the
yeah,
villain in every superhero movie. I would be down with that
right?
if Jeff Bridges was in every superhero movie as the villain.
It's
Amazing.
fantastic. So obviously we got the Riddler. We also have another villain slash hero slash love interest in Catwoman, played by Zoe Kravitz. Where do you land on Catwoman here?
Listen, again, Zoe Kravitz, amazing actor. I think this is the year of Zoe Kravitz where she's really like she was in
Yeah.
Kimmy. She's in the Batman. I know she's been doing work, but like she's really kind of starting to. I think this is the year that people are gonna like. She's gonna become a household name. She did
Yeah.
an amazing job. I felt it was just like hewing a little bit too close to what we've seen before. Like it didn't bring anything new to the character. Not that it has to be genre changing or it has to like bring
Yeah.
something like groundbreaking every time. But I felt like I'd just seen this with Anne Hathaway not that long ago in terms of
It was a
the
very
character
similar arc
development.
to Anne's Catwoman, right?
Yeah, no, yeah, which is again one of the frustrations I had with the movie was like, for me, like the movie was always just like there was amazing scenes in and of themselves, but it lacked an overall kind of arc or connecting tissue. And it was like the frustrating thing was like, oh, this movie for me was like it was really good. It could have been like great. It could have been phenomenal, but it was just like these little roadblocks that just kept holding it back. But like Catwoman is always a great foil for Batman because they're both these morally ambiguous characters.
Yeah.
And I think in the comics and even in the animated show, there's this kind of sexual tension, or there's like that relationship between them, like where they want to have a romantic relationship
Yeah.
or that level of intimacy, but their lives and their choices in life kind of prohibit that. And there's that kind of element about it, which did really well in this, of kind of humanizing both of them as well and like being each other's anchors emotionally and psychologically. What did you think?
One of the things I really liked about Catwoman, I mean, aside from this killer Zoe Kravitz performance, is just seeing her in Kimmy a little while ago. Is just like, yeah, she's one to look out for. I liked that Selena Kyle here is acting with her own agency throughout most of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I sent you a text message about this after watching it, is that she is really like her story. She doesn't necessarily need Batman in her life. She doesn't need to do his help to go through. And we see her just sort of like pop up in different scenes because the Batman story and Catwoman story are intersecting with some similar characters. But there could very well be a full Catwoman story here, like a whole movie that's maybe half as long as this one,
great.
where she gets to basically investigate the murder of her friend, right? And I thought that was great agency for her character. It was just, she was
like
really well done
the
here.
Bat CU and just like have standalone movies, but like
Yeah.
the one scene that really exemplifies that, when they're doing the investigation and she goes undercover into the bar with like into the club within the club. I think it's like, was it the Iceberg Lounge? But then there's like the 44 Below is like the club between in the club. It's like you got to be in the know. It's also, I want to give a shout out because that was like a whole video game sequence where she had like the contact lens and she was getting like the input from the mission control. It's like, oh yeah, you got to go talk to this person. Look him in the eye. It's like this is getting just huge video game vibes from this, which was like, it was a fun little. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it was kind of neat in terms of the conflicting motivations and her having her own agency. Batman was like, oh, this person mentioned something about, like the rat or like the stool pigeon or whatever they were looking for.
The DA mentions the rat,
Yeah, and she's like, stay on him. It's like, no, but somebody else mentioned Annika, her missing friend, and she's like, no, I'm following up on the lead for Annika. He's like, and Batman's getting visibly upset. He's like, no, stay with we need to unravel this bigger mystery. He's like, I don't. She's like, I don't care about you and your mystery. My friend needs help, and it's the only reason I agree to do this. So you see those conflicting motivations, and it's like, you get the feeling that these people, it's especially important for female characters, because like female characters are usually written as always being motivated by the men or being damsels in distress and falling into those kind of powerless archetypes. So to see this kind of narrative structure where the female characters have their own goals and motivations and their strengths and their weaknesses, I think is telling to how far we're, the steps that we're taking culturally to kind of even out those disparities between men and women, right?
And a very pointed commentary when she's going through the club and she has, the male gaze, all these guys looking at her, catcalling her, all this stuff. And Batman makes a comment. It's just like, oh, wow. It's just like, this is what it's like, right? It's just
like these guys.
She's like, yeah, all women are dealing with these types of comments and looks constantly.
It was nice to recognize in superhero films because like, he says something like, these guys have trouble maintaining eye contact. And it's like, yeah. She's like, yeah, it's great, isn't it? It's like, it's a nice little bit of kind of social commentary and otherwise kind of, fun superhero ride.
And I'm not sure if I was picking up on like a theme for Catwoman, but definitely Batman Returns with Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman definitely had her own musical cues and theme.
Well,
and I kept hearing a bit of that.
And
it's just like, it's the same kind of like violin sounds from Batman Returns. It just sends shivers up my spine every time I hear it, because I'm reminded of that nostalgia for the old movie. And it's just like, yeah, this is Catwoman has always been a very compelling character on screen. Just such a great foil for Batman.
It would be great to have this, like, have a Catwoman movie, like you're saying, and then Batman comes in a little bit, but it's like, it would be great to follow other characters in the Batverse. Like have like a Catwoman movie, have a Penguin movie, have a Nightwing movie, have these other movies, and then come together like an MCU style Avengers movie. And that's what the Batman movie is. That'd be kind of cool. That'd be a different take.
If that has to bring us into talking about the Penguin, played by Colin Farrell, and supposedly
played by Colin Farrell in the role that James Gandolfini was born to play.
Honestly, for
Not
sure.
to take away from Colin Farrell's performance, which was amazing. I was like, as soon as he came on screen and doing like the kind of like New York, New Jersey accent, it's like, hey, what's going on over here? It's like, and James Gandolfini was like, he would have been perfect for this role, right?
And supposedly he's going to get his own HBO Max like TV series, which could kind of be a hint at that greater BCU, the Batman Cinematic Universe, of having these characters doing their own things. And the way the Batman finishes is basically the Penguin being able to like grab at the void of power that happens when Falcone is dead and gone, right?
Oh, hashtag spoilers.
Well, we gave a spoiler alert earlier in the show. I think we're fair game at this point. But yeah, I mean, he was almost unrecognizable. It's like, rewatching it, I can see I can see his eyes, and it's just like, okay, that is Colin Farrell. But
I can't see Colin Farrell in the makeup. But that brings me to that point. Is like, Colin Farrell did an amazing job. He's an amazing actor, so he's going to do a bang up job. Why bury Colin Farrell in 50 pounds of makeup and prosthetics when he's in 3 or 4 scenes? And it's like, why not give that to like a character actor? If you want somebody who's a bit larger and who fits that archetype, it's like there were character actors out there who could do this role. Like, why? It's an odd choice, right? I don't know. It was weird to me.
It honestly reminded me of X-Men Apocalypse, where Oscar Isaac is cast as Apocalypse and put under 100 pounds of like purple makeup and prosthetics. It's just like, you don't even know it's Oscar Isaac. Looks nothing like him. You could get a solid character actor that's going to be able to do these things. But maybe they cast Colin Farrell just...
There's a method to the madness, maybe, but it's like, it was great. Amazing makeup, great performance again. But again, this question is like, I mean, why? It's like, you look at the casting like in Batman Returns of Danny DeVito, is like amazing, right? He fits like that kind of like that body type and that physique you're looking for, right? It's like, why put somebody in a fat suit when you could like just look for like put in a casting call for Italian American stereotype number 365. Hey, I'm walking over here.
How did you feel about Andy Serkis as Alfred, Bruce's butler? This probably should lead into a bigger conversation about the presence or maybe the lack thereof of Bruce Wayne in this movie.
Well, I mean, you got to be careful because if you blink, you literally miss Andy Serkis in this movie.
It's one of those things where Andy Serkis, I mean, I love this actor. He's doing all sorts of good stuff. And he's in here for just a few minutes, and half the movie, he's basically injured in a hospital bed. It's just like, you got to do something better with Andy.
Man,
but
Alfred
the story is what it is.
Criminally underused. They done Alfred dirty, son. He was given nothing to do, and even you look at something like the Dark Knight trilogy, or you'll even look at Tim Burton's Batman films. Alfred was a key character. Right. It was one of the key links to Bruce Wayne's humanity, right? Which is always that dichotomy between Bruce Wayne and Batman. That dichotomy in the psychology between those two identities was always a key factor. And Alfred's kind of, father-like relationship, mentor-like relationship with Bruce Wayne / Batman, that was always a key part of the character, that relationship. And to see it missing here, and I thought what they were going to do when he wakes up in the hospital and they're having that kind of heart to heart, and he realizes like Bruce Wayne was not really Bruce Wayne. He's just Batman the whole time. Right. So the Batman without the mask is there. And he's just saying, like, I'm not afraid to die, but I'm afraid to go through the pain of losing people I love again. I thought it was going to be like, oh, like you're kind of like my father. I thought it was gonna be like, oh, like, you've been my surrogate father, and like have that kind of emotional bonding. But instead it just like cuts away.
He's pretty cold. Like Bruce is pretty cold in that. And even Alfred is saying, it's just like, I tried to be the best father to you that I could, because he basically adopted Bruce after his parents were killed. It's just like, Alfred is beating himself up saying, I kind of failed at doing that job. And Bruce is just yeah, I'm not really afraid of dying. Okay.
I mean, we're told that, but we don't get to see it, unfortunately.
We don't see any of it,
because Alfred's in the character for like literally like maybe 5 minutes of the 3-hour runtime.
It's unfortunate because the Nolan Batman with Alfred had some pretty good words of wisdom, and he did ground Bruce quite a bit. He definitely added more to that character. Well, and the one thing I want to...
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in offhand, one of the things I walked away with on the first viewing was I was so happy that there were more staff helping in the mansion, so to speak. It's just like we see the older lady. I don't know if she was doing what she was doing, but at least Alfred had some staff in this one. That always kind of drove me crazy.
They doubled their staff.
Yeah, they doubled their staff for this movie. I was just so happy because just like, oh no, there's no way Alfred's going to be running the Batcave and Bruce's regular life at the same time. It's like, you got to give some more staff in here at least. But
so unfortunately, Andy Serkis was really underused. And I mean, I was going to save this till later when we're getting into like more of the negatives, but since you brought it up, I know like when I was a kid, I always found like the Bruce Wayne parts of Batman movies super boring. And I was like, just show me the Batman again. I want to see Batman do stuff and punch bad guys in the face. But like watching the Batman where like Bruce Wayne, A, rarely shows up, and B, is exactly the same as Batman in personality. Yeah. I was like, all of a sudden it made me realize like that the Bruce Wayne character is so important to the Batman character, and like those two identities and the conflict between them, or the tension between those two identities, is really core to the character. And that to me was like a fundamental flaw of what kept this movie from being great, and it kept it just being good. Is like, it was almost like what's one of the problems I've noticed with the Star Wars movies, particularly like Rogue One, and in the end scene, the hallway with Darth Vader, and he fights all the good guys. And people like really love that scene. I think the problem is that same thing is evident in the Batman, the same kind of mentality where it's all reduced to like this power fantasy of, I want to see the Batman punch bad guys in the face, because that's the power fantasy that people want to project. It's like, as opposed to like, this is a deeply scarred and troubled man who's dealing with intense trauma, and the Batman persona is a way of him kind of processing his trauma. But if you look at the Dark Knight trilogy, through the whole trilogy, it was like there was a tension between Bruce Wayne and Batman, where it's like, yeah, Bruce Wayne was like, Batman was the real identity and Bruce Wayne was the mask, but he was constantly trying to reverse that, right? Like Bruce Wayne, like Batman is not a happy character. He's not psychologically stable, and Bruce Wayne is the one who has a chance at happiness. And so for the entire trilogy, Bruce Wayne is trying to like make the Batman, like use the Batman to build a world where the Batman is no longer necessary, so he can essentially it's like the Batman's like a demon, right? Where he's trying to exercise his demon so he can get on with his life and find some semblance of happiness. And in this movie, there's no tension. It's just like, it's the cartoon power trip version or power fantasy version of Batman, where it's like, I just want to see Batman Batmaning it up and punching bad guys in the face and punching walls and doing whatever he wants all the time with no consequences. It's like, which is like, it's again, on a visceral level, it's fun to watch the cowboy come into town and, you know, the vigilante clean up the streets.
Yeah.
But it gets tiresome after a while if there's nothing underneath that, if there's no tension underneath that. And for me, that was, it's like, it's the most Batman we've seen on screen in a Batman film, like hands down. He's always Batman. But like the lack of Bruce Wayne is like, it really highlighted how important those Bruce Wayne scenes were in previous movies.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. I want to go back in time here to the original 4 Batman movies that started with Tim Burton.
Yeah.
Batman and Batman Returns had very little in that way of the dual identity. Like Michael Keaton's Batman was just kind of a kooky, you know, rich character that like other characters were just like, well, he's a mysterious person.
Well, sort of, but it was also like, if you look at the first one, when he was like with Vicky Vale, he was trying to have a life outside of being Batman, right? He was trying to create some kind of happiness. He was trying to have, he was trying to, there was a goal for Bruce Wayne, right? To not need the Batman, or to tell somebody to bring them into the world, to bring him into his world, to have that family. So there was, again, it was done it didn't go as deep as the Nolan films, but there was something there, right?
Yeah. And then the second Batman Returns, I think there's even less Bruce Wayne in that one. And the third Batman with Val Kilmer is probably the most in-depth we got with Bruce Wayne, where I think he's actively seeking therapy and stuff in that movie, right? With Nicole Kidman's character. What was her name? Meriden Chase or
Chase Meridian?
Chase Meridian, yeah, fantastic.
Don't ask me how I knew that off the top of my head.
Well, Nicole Kidman, come on. But there was just like, he was, and I really love Batman Forever because he was kind of wrestling, even though it was a little tongue-in-cheek and a little campy, is that he was wrestling like the dual relationships, like Batman and Bruce Wayne both liked Chase, but Chase liked both of them for different reasons, right? I kind of liked how he was trying to juggle that, but we got a lot more Bruce Wayne in that movie than we had previously been accustomed to.
It's telling that there's more psychological depth to the character in Batman Forever than in the Batman, where like there's that revelation at the end of Batman Forever where he's like, now I'm the Batman, not because I have to be, but now because I choose to be. And like that goes deeper psychologically than the Batman ever goes with the character in this movie. And like Batman and Robin, it's hard to go back and watch, but Batman Forever, I think, is like, as I think back on it, I look back on it with more fondness than I may have initially, or not initially, but like I may have, when I saw it as a kid, I loved it. And then I went through that period. It's like, oh, going back compared to the Tim Burton movies, it was so like lighthearted and campy and But now I'm like going back kind of almost full circle, is like appreciating some of that tone shift a bit more, right?
And I'm kind of hoping that if we get a nice trilogy of this, is that we finally get like a Robin into the Batman universe, because that is also a really good way of pulling out Bruce Wayne and his character dynamics and depth to bring someone who had sort of a similar, like losing their parents and teach them about, you know, this life of crime fighting and whatnot. I think that can help deepen the Bruce Wayne character from the Batman. And maybe it's just that we'll get that a little later on. We're just missing it in this first film.
Well, there was always like this weird kind of paradox with the Batman and the Bat family, right? It was like, you have the Batman I keep calling him the Batman now because of this movie, but you have Batman who is like this lone ranger type. Is like, he wants this lone wolf rides alone. But like in the comics, he's constantly pulling people in and training and mentoring new people.
Yeah.
Like you got Batgirl and you've got Robin and you've got Nightwing and you've got another Robin and you've got all these other people around him.
Well, this is kind of like a different origin story for Batman, where he hasn't learned that he can't do everything by himself yet. And it's just like we've seen so much of solo Batman is the problem, right?
Sort of, but like the whole Nolan trilogy was him. Like he had Alfred and he had Lucius Fox to help him. He had Catwoman was helping him. He had the
but he
fake
didn't
Robin.
have the Bat. He didn't have the. I mean, and two of those characters you mentioned are only in the third film, and it's like we needed a Robin. We needed more of the Bat family in the rest of the movie, but I mean, or the rest of the series. Sorry, but anyways,
yeah. But that to me is like one of the fundamental failings of the movie is like that lack of psychological depth to the Batman. I know they try to bring it in. Here's the thing too, is like that whole idea of Batman who calls himself, he introduces himself like when they ask like, who are you? He's like, I'm vengeance. It's like great scene. Sends shivers down my spine. I think it's pulled from a comic book run. I can't remember which one it was, but I think it's a quote or paraphrase of a quote from one of the comic book runs. And then you have other people calling him vengeance, even though they weren't there to hear that line. They're kind of mocking him a little bit in his self-seriousness. But it's like, I don't know if like we're meant to say is like, oh, does he go around calling himself vengeance all the time? Because he doesn't introduce himself to Catwoman as vengeance, but she keeps calling him vengeance.
I have to assume something like that is just explained away in universe. It's like, well, he just told this group of thugs I was vengeance, and then these thugs would go around and be like, well, what did you guys run into? It's just like he called himself vengeance. And I think Catwoman there plays into that like flirty, kind of like joking manner. It's just like, yeah, the criminal underworld wants to call you vengeance, and it's kind of goofy. You know what I mean? And I kind of feel like,
it was just a weird choice. But like, so there's this parallel between Batman and the Riddler, right? Batman introduces himself as vengeance, and then the Riddler is trying to get vengeance on who he sees as like corrupt people who are, at the core of the corruption in Gotham. And then at the end, when Batman's beaten the ever loving, fluff out of this
fluff,
ever loving shit out of this Riddler henchman, he pulls the mask off, and they're like, and Gordon's there asking, "Is like, who are you?" And the Riddler goon says, "I'm vengeance." And like all of a sudden, Batman has this like realization. It's like, oh, so there's parallels that the filmmakers and Reeves are building up between Batman and the Riddler. So it's like,
let's talk about that. Because I actually made some notes. It's like, I don't know if it was just so obvious that even I myself picked up on the parallels between Riddler and Batman, but there's like 4 or 5 points here that we can bring up.
It was definitely intentional. Like at the beginning where you were talking about, the movie starts where you see somebody, you're looking through the same eyes. It's a first person viewpoint, looking through binoculars.
It's the voyeur look.
Yeah. And it's like, at the beginning, I was like, is this Batman looking at somebody or is it the bad guy looking at somebody? So right away, and there's a later scene where Batman is he's spying on Catwoman in the same way. And all of a sudden, so you get that parallel between, because it's revealed later on that the person who was watching the mayor in the beginning was a bad guy, who's the Riddler. Yep. But you see that same methodology in what they're doing. You see the journal taking, right? The journal making.
I thought that was a really important scene earlier in the Batcave. Batman is journaling by hand, like he's physically writing this out, just as the Riddler does. I mean,
like
Riddler
maniacs
does a little more
on
like
paper.
Maniacs, right? Yeah, it's just like who writes their thoughts down on paper anymore? You just got to type that stuff up on a computer.
Nerd.
But yeah, and of course the other point, like I think the Riddler mentions their masks, and even like in that quote unquote interrogation scene after Riddler is thrown into Arkham or jail or whatever. Riddler doesn't care who's behind the mask. He's just like, they are the masks, right?
Well, this is the thing that the movie tries to make deeper psychological points, right? Like the Riddler specifically says, putting on the mask allowed me to be who I truly was, right? Yeah. Implying that, Batman / Bruce Wayne is the same thing. We're putting on the Batman costume and the mask is allowing him to be the person that he truly is. It's like, it's that sense of playing into the Riddler's character too, is like online anonymity, right? If you take away, it's like this idea of like taking away consequences. So there's a dark side of this, right? If you take away consequences, it's like, oh yeah, I'm free to be quote unquote who I really am, which is like, that's a scary way of kind of looking at people's identities, right? That if you were somehow consequence free, that you do all kinds of terrible stuff. It's like, So it's trying to make that parallel between the two characters as well, but it doesn't do anything with that going forward. Like the Riddler makes an offhanded comment and it's unsettling at the time, but if you go back, like the movie doesn't build on that like it should have, because that wasn't a great theme that they could have played with. But to see, and then the whole thing with the Riddler leaving the clues was that A, he was inspired by the Batman to act, right? And B, he thought that the Batman was working with him the whole time, and that these clues were like their little secret code between them. It was kind of his, like, he was obviously delusional.
Yeah.
But he thought that because he looked up to Batman and he was inspired by Batman, he was leaving these clues like, oh, this is our secret game that we're playing together. So when Batman shows up and starts saying like, I wasn't trying to help you. Like, that was all just incidental. Like, I'm trying to stop you the whole time and you're crazy and your plan is crazy. And Riddler goes crazy. It's this is not how this is supposed to go. Like, he thought they were best friends, right? It was almost like that's kind of stalker syndrome, right?
Yeah. No, I could appreciate that. But I want to talk about for a second here, one of the big things I took away from on my initial viewing and being able to revisit it in the second viewing is the initial viewing. I was kind of left a bit, let's say, disappointed that Riddler is kind of like, say a genius at making riddles and these clues. And he spent a lot of time making these things. He makes a maze with a black light writing on it, all this fun stuff. But the issue is that I was expecting to go back to the film and like see something revealed at the end, but we're going to have actual clues throughout the entire movie that maybe we just missed. And rewatching the movie, there's nothing really there. There's no clues throughout. It's like if you're watching a murder mystery or something, like you're watching like Knives Out, for instance, where right, it's just like you can go back and rewatch that and pick up on all these little details that you missed. But in Batman, there's none of that. And I think the reason is that the film shoots itself in the foot by having the Riddler think he's pals with Batman. He is not a foible. He's not challenging Batman. He's just giving him clues like a friend would give you a puzzle. Say,
like,
why don't you go and solve that in your free time there?
Like your
I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing.
You ever do that with your friends and like when you're kids, like, let's make a secret code so we can write each other notes in class.
Yeah, exactly. So Batman, like, it doesn't matter if he solves these or not because the crimes will continue. And the final crime, in this movie, blowing up all the levees around the city, weren't hinted at in these clues at all. Like, it wasn't something Batman had the ability to discover on his own.
Yeah, this is the problem. Like, if you look at the films it's trying to emulate, like if you go back and watch Seven or Zodiac, Seven in particular, like watching that the first time and then going back and rewatching it and looking at all the clues, is like you're seeing how everything kind of connects. And it's like it's that eye-opening moment. And like honestly, like the clues weren't the puzzles weren't particularly challenging. Like the whole thing with like the thumb drive and everything, and like, let me just say, like,
it was a joke
for all the criticisms of police incompetence in the Nolan films, like when they all went down the tunnels and stuff. Like the police were super incompetent in this film and super irrational. Like they went down to the car park. It's like they didn't when they found the thumb drive clue in the car with like the obvious murder weapon, or like the shears used to remove the mayor's thumb, sticking in plain view, sticking out of the tires. You're telling me like the police didn't scour the entire apartment and the parking garage for clues? Like basic police work of just like looking around the rooms in which
and the only rebuttal I would have to that is like, we're also discovering how corrupt all the police are. Like one of the detectives is in his off hours or his off duty hours, he's at the 44 below working with the Penguin and Falcone, like he's on the payroll. That's the only thing I'll say with there. And I do still agree with your point. It's like they still miss things.
Part of that, but it's like also when they arrest Falcone, it's like there's like 200 cops out there who are not corrupt. It's like odds are one of those, because like
that was a
crime
funny
scene.
moment.
That crime scene was just like there's like 50 cops in this one crime scene. It's like, what about the rest of the city? Do they not get patrolled? Like the rest of Falcone was pretty funny in the second viewing of this movie, because they come out and Falcone's just like, don't you understand? Like I run the police, and Gordon is basically saying, well, you don't own all of us. And then the doors open, there's literally 200 cops there. I was expecting like maybe 5 or 10. Yeah.
Because in other iterations of Batman stories, we have Gordon's like most trusted task force, right? And that's what I was kind of expecting here. And then finding out, oh, maybe this is going to lead up into, a James Gordon HBO Max series where he's got to clean up the police force. I thought that would have been pretty cool.
Also, just like saying this right now is like controlling the police just reminded me of Rick and Morty and Mr. Nimbus. It's like he controls the police. What do you mean he controls the police? He controls the police. It's like Falcone was like Mr. Nimbus. What's his power? He's like he just controls the police.
He just controls them, man.
But so there is some comic book movie logic that I'll let slide. But it's like the problem is when the movies directly invite me to ask these questions, like firing off like hundreds of live rounds in a police station when Batman's trying to escape as they're shooting at each other.
Really shocking. Yeah. It's just like because Batman's ziplining up this giant stairwell and there's people on the stairwell and the police at the bottom just start shooting blindly at Batman. Can we also talk about how invincible Batman was in this movie? He is shot with automatic rifles at point blank range and it doesn't affect him.
Good and the bad. The bat suit looked it would look really slick. It looked really, really good. I liked like almost like homemade look of the cowl and everything. Yeah. And like how I liked how the his grappling hook was like built into his like his
wrist guards.
His greaves there. Yeah, his wrist guards. And he's like it came out and it's like that's a really cool innovation I hadn't seen before. So like Batsuit was like looked really cool, but again it's like it was like he was literally wearing plot armor. It was like he was taking full on like automatic weapon rounds, point blank range, which like hundreds or thousands of rounds, shrugging it off like nothing. And B, it's like none of those goons are getting hit by ricochets when they're like literally like 2 feet in front of them, still firing away.
I have a feeling that like on the cutting room floors, a few shots of that, like especially that very first scene where he's being shot and like you kind of see sparks flying all over. I can't help but think maybe to get down to like a PG-13 or something for this film, that they just cut out the scenes of like the bad guys getting hit by those ricochets, but that's a little aside anyways.
Yeah. So like the bat suit, the problem is like the rest of the movie's telling me is like, oh, it's set in like, if not our world, then a world that's parallel to it and a world where the physical rules of their world are similar to the physical rules of our world. Mm-hmm. But then you're telling me like it's immune to all gunfire. It's immune to, he gets exploded at point blank range, standing there stupidly, I might add, for no reason. And it doesn't hurt him. The only time he gets her is like a shotgun for some reason, which I guess video game logic.
Shotguns, man. Yeah.
Shotguns are the most powerful weapon. And it's like, it's true. But even right before that, he was like, he got hit by a shotgun blast and that took him out at the end because the plot needed it to. But just before that, he got hit like full on point blank with a hunting rifle and that didn't phase him at all. So like, but it took out, what that suit did was it took out all tension in those scenes. It was like, he can get shot infinite times. It doesn't hurt him. So it was like, well, he's in no danger of dying then. Like,
I can't keep thinking about what you mentioned earlier, where it's like, this is the power fantasy, right? Yeah. And that is the power fantasy of being invincible. And I think just before this recording, we were talking about playing a video game. I'm playing a game where I just turn on invincibility and run through the game with infinite ammo because I just want to see the cutscenes and stuff. It's just like, I like that power fantasy. And yeah, I mean, it is pretty powerful when you go into a group of like 20 goons and they're all shooting at you and you just start laughing. But it basically makes Batman kind of like Superman because it's the most weaponry a criminal would have is guns. And when Superman flies in, it's no challenge. Now when Batman flies in, he doesn't even have to move out of the way. He's just getting shot.
Yeah, he's like a tank, which I can appreciate, but it's like, I don't know what is that armor made of, where like he's getting shot at, but he's like, he's not being bruised afterwards. So like it's some kind of magical Iron Man kind of armor. I don't know.
At least with the Michael Keaton Batman in the 1989, he gets shot at the beginning of the film. He still feels that force. He falls back.
Gets knocked down.
He gets knocked down, right? This one, he's not even flinching. It's just like, he can't. It also kind of makes me think all the effects were just like added afterwards in post. Like these aren't like, on set little squibs or anything.
Yeah. Well, I think this was PG-13, correct?
I believe so.
Because like one of the influences, obviously, the genre influences was like noir films, obviously like detective films and that kind of thing. And so I think I was reading some reviews online, but like it had the darkness of like noir films, but none of the actual like grime. Yeah. It was dark, but it was still clean, right? You see a little bit of the blood from like the the murder of the mayor up front, but you don't see a lot of. It's really mostly bloodless violence, and so it's like it's very the feel of the film, which again they did a great job at creating that atmosphere. It's like it's dark and gritty, but it's still very clean and very sanitized. And I think that's an overall kind of tension with the film that kind of fails for me. Like it succeeds in one way, like the cinematography is great, but talking about the themes of the film and the feel of the film is just like something, there's a disconnect there, right? Where they want to have their cake and eat it too, right? They want Batman to be like, vulnerable, but then you give him turn on God mode, and we're give him the armor that you can't break, right?
So I gotta move on a little bit from this and say something super positive about this movie.
Yes.
The music, okay? The score,
Dun,
the use
dun,
of Nirvana's song, right?
Dun, dun,
It'll stay in your
dun.
head for weeks. And it's like, I'm rewatching it again, it's like, oh, it is in like every scene. And it's like, it is business. Like things are happening now when that music, like when that Batman's cue comes on, it just feels so good while you're watching it.
Listen, musically, they were on point. Like you were pointing out, the Catwoman theme, easily identifiable. There was a whole, I think, Batman suite where it's like that main theme, but there's also like, music was really well done. Same with like the cinematography and how it was shot. Like, the only issue
red
I had,
lights everywhere.
Yeah, like they really stuck to the red and black color theme.
Yeah.
What I didn't like, though, the only thing I didn't like about the look of the movie was like, oh my God, it was so dark. Like
it was super dark.
Was Gotham in the middle of like a blackout that they didn't mention or something? Or a brownout or something?
Can we talk about Gotham here for a second too? And I'll just add on to the darkness. My dad went to see this movie in theater, and when I was talking to him on the phone afterwards, he was talking about the Batmobile scene.
Yes.
And this is kind of twofold here. He loved the Batmobile, and I love the Batmobile. Everyone loves the Batmobile.
Yeah.
And he made the point, I wish I could see more of the Batmobile. Like, not just more runtime, but I wish I could see it on screen because the scene was so dark. The other aspect of that is that I saw the entire chase scene in the trailer for this movie. It absolutely
right?
demolished that part of the movie for me. I was so disappointed, but it's like, at least I got to see it on the big screen. And it's just like, but I saw most of the trailer.
So I think Ryan George, who does the pitch meeting videos there, he made, in his pitch meeting video for the Batman, he jokes about how every Batman movie has to be darker and darker. Eventually we're just gonna have a black screen and like people reading audiobooks or something. It's like, it'll save us a ton of money. I thought that Tim Burton's Batman was shot pretty dark, and like the Dark Knight trilogy was like, it takes place mostly at night, but like looking at those movies, and like, everything's still like well lit. It's dark, but it's well lit. You can see everything. Like you say, like, okay, one of the best scenes in the movie, that chase with the Batmobile where he's chasing down the Penguin. Listen, again, that goes to show, I think, Matt Reeves and his particular eye for action, whereas like the way the cameras were mounted, like on the sides of the cars, or like framing the Penguin in the car, and that kind of thing is like really well done, really clean. You can follow the action really well. But again, it's like, I want to actually see the action. It's like, I know it's nighttime, but it's like, I don't know.
This movie was drenched.
Yeah, to the point where it was like, it was made watching it kind of difficult sometimes, because like it was just so oppressive. I was like, and stuff. I was like, I want to see something. I know like Batman operates at night in the shadows, but like, in order for there to be shadows, there has to be light to contrast it with, right? Yeah, I'm not talking just like visually, but also like philosophically as well, right? Like.
So, and I got to mention Gotham here as well, because Gotham is as much of a character in Batman films as anything else. And it's something that I feel like they've kind of been lacking, obviously, in the Snyderverse. Gotham Metropolis. Gotham is kind of depicted as just like these crime-ridden slums. In the original Batman films, like Tim Burton's Batman, like a lot of Gothic design, obviously really interesting. Batman Forever and even Batman and Robin, like, full of these giant skyscraper statues. Like it felt like a unique place. And then Nolan's Batman's very much grounded. You can see Chicago, you can see Pittsburgh where they filmed it. And this one, they chose to film again in Chicago, and you're seeing some of the elevated rails, and you're like, is this literally just down the street from some of the the Batman Begins? And it's just like, it didn't have as much character going for it. And there was lots of skylines here that I'm sure were just like a bunch of added CGI towers and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I didn't really get like, I want to see a more garish and outlandish Gotham.
Yeah, like that Art Deco style from the animated series.
Yeah.
That's what I always
Oh, that was
associate with
incredible.
Gotham now, right? Is like almost like that 50s or 60s, what the 50s or 60s envisioned the future to be.
Yeah.
Like you see
Yeah.
like the 50s or 60s future like in the Fallout games, and it's like similar to the Batman animated series. Like that to me is like, that always feels like Gotham, right?
Yeah.
That weird.
It'd be neat to see a live
weird
action
mesh.
version of that. And I
Yeah.
think we got close, and even in Batman Returns, the architecture and whatnot was pretty unique.
But I will say, like, in terms of like different shots too, like, so the Batmobile chase was great. Like the fighting, even though like Batman couldn't take he could take infinite hits with bullets, like the choreography was still really, really good. It felt really well done. Like it was like it had weight to it when they were punching each other and stuff.
Yeah.
There were some iconic shots of like Batman and Catwoman standing on that half-finished structure. Another one where Batman was like leading people in the darkness there at the end. So they're really good. Like, dare I say, like even iconic imagery that's going to come out of this. And so like, yeah, like the way it was shot, even though it was like a little bit too dark, I hope they ease up on that in future movies. I thought like overall the look of the film, like really, really well done. And like individual scenes, great action and great like actual like great shooting, right? So like great framing of shots, right? It speaks to Matt Reeves' ability as a director. That is to say, he is a really, really good director with a great eye for the visuals, right?
How did you feel about the 176-minute runtime of this movie? One of the lengthier Batman films, for sure.
Listen, the first time in the theater with my son, I was just like so caught up in like, listen, I was like,
it goes by quickly.
I was grinning a lot. Like that whole Batmobile, when the Batmobile is revealed to the time like he chases, like causes Penguin to crash, and he's walking slowly towards him. And that upside down shot was again amazing looking shot. Also, like Batman is like super taking his time in this movie. He walks super slow everywhere he goes.
Well, I kind of like that there's some, and again, I'll offer a slight rebuttal to in universe where he has the contact lenses that are doing all the recording, right? And I like that he's going through a crime scene very slowly, and he has to like stare at things, which is kind of ominous and creepy to everyone around him. But it's like, no, he's just literally recording to make sure he gets stuff, which I thought was really neat.
That makes sense in those scenes, but in other scenes was like, you need some urgency here, Batman. Like the Penguin can still have like a gun or a grenade or something. It's like, you gotta like get up there quick.
Yeah.
Really cool shot though. Like it looked really,
really, like when he flips the car
and he's walking towards him, and like Penguin's like looking at him like in fear, and it's like it's all upside down. It's like it's telling.
That was like
it's telling a story.
That was like a shot from like a Western through and through. Like you could just paint some spurs on Batman's shoes there, and it was just like, oh man.
I think you could actually, in the sound mixing, I think they put in the sound of spurs when he was walking at a certain point, like that scene in particular. But I think you asked me another question, but talking about the whole Western influence, I think I hadn't actually made that connection before between superheroes and Westerns, and that lineage between the Western, cowboy or the protagonist of Western films. There's a lot of parallels in terms of just thematically. I'm going to kind of run through some of them. Isolation, right? Typically, the Western hero was like a loner. Asexuality didn't quite play into this because he was obviously flirting with Catwoman, but he usually doesn't have a relationship, right? Because he's focused on his work. Vigilantism, I don't think I need to explain that one at all with Batman. A clearly defined moral code and a sense of honor. Obviously, Batman's no killing rule, which again shows up here. Highly skilled, usually really proficient, typically in violence. Normally, like cowboys are firearms, but obviously Batman's the martial artist with all his karate. I liked how Batman was not very chatty, right? But just like the Western hero,
the silent protagonist.
Yeah, he when he did talk, it made all the more impact then, right?
Yeah.
And then he's active, right? It's like most people are afraid to act, but like the Western hero is like, he's going to do whatever it takes. He's the one who's going to spring into action. So there's a whole, I think the superheroes are part of that lineage. But Batman in particular, from cowboys to, I think, noir and detective stories to superheroes. And I think Matt Reeves and the writers were really smart to draw on that kind of genre lineage and that genre influence. It did them a lot of favors. What was your initial question about runtime? Yeah,
Yeah.
watching this the second time, I really felt the runtime a lot more, especially that last third of the movie after they
Yeah.
catch the Riddler and that tacked on. I was looking at people and the reasoning for that set piece battle and everything, and I was like, it still feels tacked on at the end.
I think that I saw best described in a review on Letterboxd as a wet fart of a final act.
Yeah, it was I guess a 2 hour movie squeezed, 2.5 hour movie squeezed into 3 hours, I think. And listen, so that also, again, so the whole thing about Riddler's motivation, we talked about Riddler earlier, where he was vengeance. He was trying to, he was targeting people who he thought were corrupt, right? Corrupt police officers, corrupt government officials. And then at the end, it's like, oh no, I'm just going to blow up the seawall and kill hundreds of people randomly. And then my followers are going to have like an active shooter situation.
Yeah.
And then kill a bunch of random people. I was like, well, your ideology all of a sudden just shifted to like, now you're an agent of chaos. Right? It's like his shift into like targeted vengeance into just broad scale nihilism. It only makes sense in the kind of meta influence of the Dark Knight and the Joker, who was like, he was a nihilist and he was an agent of chaos, and he had like this, he wanted to bring down people's moral code, and it also only makes sense in the idea of the studio exec who wants to see is like, we need a big third act, or in this case fourth act, action set piece to end the movie off on.
Well, you said it right there, and I'll probably reiterating, but I mean, he was targeting people who were very prominent, people who made promises and didn't keep their end of the bargain.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're literally going after the innocent people of Gotham City by just drowning them. And it's just like, it's pretty, as you said.
Which I wouldn't mind so much. It's like, it's a complete 180 from his earlier motivations. Like the motivations just didn't make sense in that context. If they would have ended it shortly after that interrogation scene or whatever, find a way to wrap it up then, is like that whole last act of the movie just felt so tacked on. That felt so, I don't know, obviously, because we're not Hollywood insiders, that last half hour of like the flooding and then Batman going to stop this mass shooter situation, that felt so tacked on. That reeked of like studio interference to me.
So we got to talk about deleted scenes here, and most notably, about a month or so after this movie came out, they released on YouTube a deleted scene that featured a conversation between Batman and the Joker, although I think he's kind of unnamed. In the movie, he's very clearly the Joker, who is already incarcerated in Arkham Asylum or whatever prison there, Blackgate or whatever they're using there. Do you think that was a wise move, removing that scene from the movie? Like, do you think it was interesting that they had the Riddler and Joker kind of a little quick scene with the two of them talking near the end of the film?
I didn't like them talking at the end, because it's like, just, if you're gonna have the Joker, just tell me it's a Joker. Like, don't play these, don't be coy about it. It's like, oh, who's this character laughing maniacally in this other team? It's like, it's obvious it's the Joker. It's who do you think you're fooling with this, right?
It's true. Again,
I'm of mixed feelings about that scene, because like the scene itself, I think that, was it named Barry Corgan? What's that actor's name?
Barry Keoghan.
Barry Keoghan. He does. I actually watched it a couple times, and I was like, again, I think you see Heath Ledger's influence in that character again, because like, how could you not? Obviously, even in Jared Leto's interpretation, you saw shades of Heath Ledger in there. I think it's going to be a while before people are going to be able to kind of get out of that shadow, because it was such an iconic performance. But that being said, it was a great little scene, right, between Batman and the Joker. They probably made the right choice to cut it out, because it kind of slowed down pacing and didn't really tell them anything that they couldn't find out anyway. And it also raises all sorts of questions, like, well, did Batman put him there already? Like, what's the whole history there? That raises a whole bunch of narrative questions that the film doesn't have time to answer, with all Batman slow walking and everything, and the beautifully, gorgeously framed shots. But it's like, Matt Reeves holds those shots for a long, long time, to the movies, both like to its benefit and detriment, I think, in terms of like, it looks beautiful and you can follow the action, but on the other hand, it's like, this is a long ass movie.
Before we jump into rating and collecting, which I think we neglected on a couple previous podcasts, are there any other positives or negatives that you want to talk about before we move on to rating?
let me get my notes here. So on the positives too, I think there were some obvious. I think we talked about the obvious influences of the Dark Knight trilogy and the Tim Burton's Batman movies, but I think there were some references to the '60s Batman series as well, like with that rotary old school phone there.
Yeah.
In the office. I think that has to be a direct reference to like the phone in the Batcave in the 60s,
the old
right?
bat phone. Yeah, definitely.
And then when he was like running down the side of the building, like that has to be like a reference to them. Like, what they used to have, like turn the camera on its side and have them like crawling up with the rope on the side of the building. So I think there was like even some neat little nods to the 60s.
Yeah. Apparently in
Batman.
the Batcave there was like a statue, like a bust of a person.
Well, I was gonna
in this
say-
one that was also from the original one where they would flip up his head and push the button to like open up the entrance
I was
of the
actually
Batcave.
going to ask you about that because like I looked at that bus and I was like, that can't be. I was like, was that an homage as well to like the 60s version? Because like that immediately stuck out to me.
I haven't explored all the YouTube videos of like, the 40 Easter eggs you missed in the Batman, but I think that would be worth watching. We could probably spend a lot of time talking about that.
I think like all the performances, we didn't talk about Jeffrey Wright as Gordon. He was
pretty incredible.
Even though he wasn't given a whole lot to do, but like Jeffrey
he was
Wright,
at least present quite a bit in the film.
Yeah, Jeffrey Wright was really good. John Turturro, who's like
he's on fire right now.
Yeah, he's famous as a character actor, mostly kind of a supporting character, but like he did a really good job as this imposing villain, Carmine Falcone. Who's Falcone in other movies. It's pronounced Falcone here. But yeah, John Turturro did a really great job. Again, was it Peter Sarsgaard?
It was, yeah.
As a DA, who I think is married to Maggie Gyllenhaal. So they've both been blown up in a Batman movie. I think was a joke. So that's kind of a neat little connection. Again, like pulling on those influences from David Fincher and other noir stories, pulling on influences from Westerns. I thought that was really, really great. The cinematography was really great. Color scheme, aside from being too dark all the time, was really like really kept like until the very end where like Batman is like realizing it's like, instead of just being a tool of vengeance, I can be a tool of hope. And like when that person is being airlifted out and he's looking up and it's like, it's finally Batman's in the daylight. It's like, okay. So like thematically it kind of works, but for the actual visuals, it's kind of frustrating. What else good about this? Fight scenes, Batsuit we talked about was really great. Parallels between the Riddler and Batman. It was really smart in terms of like having them like looking at their ideology and seeing like how they were the same and how they were different. Bad. What do we say? Yeah, I think I mentioned that already about like how it was like it walked the line sometimes it crossed the line, I think, between influence and imitation sometimes. If you look at the Nolan films and thematically what they delved into things a little bit deeper, but the Batman was like everything was surface level, right? It was a great action movie, but like every time like going back and thinking about it and watching it a second time, there's nothing really deeper. Even the themes of going from vengeance to hope, it was very, very surface level. I didn't feel that there was anything much more to dig into there or to dig deeper on based on what I was presented in the text. One thing that really didn't work for me and it stuck out like a sore thumb, and I don't know, maybe you feel differently about this, Brian, the voiceover that bookended the movie.
Okay.
I know.
I'm glad you brought this up.
I know this is like a staple of kind of noir cinema, but I think it was partially, I don't know if it was the delivery, like the writing on those monologues was not great. We're talking about like the scars and how it felt like they were reading out of like a 14-year-old's journal.
I could understand like Bruce Wayne, Batman kind of being a little like childish, a little immature.
Well, he even says at one point, he literally says at one point to Alfred's like, "You're not my dad."
Yeah, right.
he's like a little angsty teenager, and like those voiceovers are so rough.
That point there too, because that's an important contextual scene where Bruce Wayne goes to see Falcone to discover the corruption and bad things that his father Thomas Wayne did, and basically Bruce just kind of believes this guy who is a known criminal for the past 20, 30 years. And then goes to talk to Alfred, be like, "You lied to me all these years. Why do you lie to me?" And Alfred's like, "It didn't really work out that way. Like, you think Falcone's telling you the absolute truth here?" And Bruce is just like, "Oh yeah." But it's literally one scene to the next and makes Bruce look like an idiot, basically.
There's no narrative tension. That would have been kind of cool. It's like, oh, maybe he's carrying this around with him for the whole movie. And then he finally gets cleared up. It's like, that's the other thing too. it takes Batman the whole movie to realize like, oh, the obvious bad guy is bad.
Yeah.
It's like, it takes you 3 hours to figure this out. It's like, well, he was obviously bad from the very beginning, but it takes you the whole movie to figure out that he was bad. It's like, oh, the obviously bad guy lied to you. It's like, wow. And it's like, you're the greatest detective. Not to travel. Like, listen, this is the first movie we've seen, I think, where he's doing like actual detective work, and people were pretty stoked about that. And like, listen, it was pretty cool to see that part of the character come out. But on the other hand, like, Batman is not coming off like as super intelligent here. I think the Riddler had it as like, oh, you're not as smart as I thought you were. And it's like, I have to agree with you there, Paul Dano, aka the Riddler.
Well, there's a whole scene where the Penguin is like kind of like deriding them for
they don't know their Spanish properly.
Yeah, they don't know their Spanish properly, which was like a big part of the clue. And it's just like, oh yeah, the Riddler is like really thinking too highly of Batman. It's just like, he's not the great detective that everyone thought he is.
Yeah. But also, did you? Sorry, did I miss it? Did you enjoy the voiceover, or did you have the same misgivings that I did? Or
yeah, so I wanted to, these were like the final 2 points that I had in my notes, and you basically delved into both of them there. But the narration, the very beginning of the movie, it's Batman, Bruce Wayne narrating. Yeah. And I got immediate Blade Runner vibes off the second viewing of this, where his narration was describing exactly what was going on the screen.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt like muting the film, because he's talking about how he's been operating for a couple of years, and every time a criminal looks in the shadow, they think Batman's there. But the on-screen is telling you exactly this, and I think the narration really misses the mark, because there's almost like a montage, like a guy robs a convenience store, comes outside, sees the bat symbol in the sky, then immediately looks down like this dark alley. We as the audience can piece together bat symbols, Batman.
Yes.
Dark alley is where Batman would come from, and the criminal is scared. And then they do a second one where I can't remember what the criminal does, but it's the exact same situation.
They're spray painting, looking, and the can drops and rolls in the shadows, and he looks.
It rolls
over.
into the shadows. It's just like, yeah, you expect
like
Batman
there
to step out. And I thought that was much more effective visual storytelling than just narration. But I mean, the first time I watched it, I didn't really care. It was just like, this is happening. But I thought, yeah, we didn't need the narration here.
You nailed it on the head, because if you took out that narration, you get exactly the same story from that narration. I wonder if that's like a studio note, the same as Blade Runner, and that disastrous narration in the first theatrical cut there.
And then there's the subway scene, of course, where he does finally come out of the shadows and beats up all the guys. So we have our being able to, the music kicks in, and it's just like, we see Batman doing his thing, and he's really good at it. Character established. Let's move on.
Yeah. And then that anything is like, oh, maybe the scars will, we learn after the scars heal, we're stronger. And it's like, this is such like cliched nonsense to be like, even like some of the writing points, like some of the writing's really good. And then you get like stuff like Catwoman like blurts out such a stupid cliched line. It's like, oh, maybe we're not so different after all. It's like, oh my God, can we have like one blockbuster movie where it just doesn't spout that stupid line? It's like, this is the thing. It's like, so frustrated with the movie, because like it's on the cusp of being amazing, and it just like keeps like shooting itself in the foot.
Yeah.
But it bounces off the armor, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. So the other point that I want to talk about, I think we kind of mentioned just recently, is much of the movie is, Bruce coming to terms with discovering that his father, his legacy isn't as, good as they thought it was. And having recently played the Telltale game of Batman, that basically handles the exact same topic. But of course, being a game that takes place over 4 or 5 hours, might explore that a little bit better. Did you play those Batman Telltale games?
I played the first one.
The first one,
several, right?
There were 2 of them, and the second one deals more with the Joker. But in the first one, and hopefully this isn't too spoilery, they basically, like the secret society that the antagonists of the movie are kind of undermining who Bruce Wayne is, and like trying to destroy his credibility, to the point where Bruce Wayne goes into a psychiatric hospital where he meets up with John Doe, who turns out to be the Joker in the next game, right? But that was so much more effective here, in the game, than it was in the movie, where it's just mainly hinted at, and maybe there's just too much story. I mean, I could understand them not fully exploring those themes in this, but it was a significant plot point that he spent numerous minutes of the movie talking to people about his father's legacy and his motivations.
Well, it's telling that relationship, that memory that Bruce has of his father Like if you wanted to make that a main plot point, to make that one of the characters' kind of underlying motivations, or build that into the character's psychological complexity, that's something you need to like introduce way, way earlier in the film, so that you can see that Batman / Bruce Wayne is grappling with that. Is like, oh, was my father corrupt? And like have him like, and like, is my entire legacy just like, am I part of that same corruption? Which they kept hinting at.
Well, he even mentions it. Yeah, he's just like, oh, what? Like I'm continuing my father's work here of cleaning up the city as Batman. And then he finds out that his father may not have been having the best interests of the city in mind, right?
Yeah, that he had that he unintentionally, through his friendship with Falcone rather, had that journalist killed, who was looking into Martha Wayne, Bruce Wayne's mother. I guess she had a history of mental illness in her family, and with herself, where she had spent some time in a mental facility, and his father Thomas Wayne was running for mayor, and so like, because it's like potentially politically damaging to have your family's dirty laundry aired, even though it's like, maybe it's, in this day and age, it's like, yeah, it's more kind of normal to talk about mental health issues, but still there's that public perception that could hurt somebody's campaign. So he just didn't want her to have to go through that suffering, the public humiliation of people picking apart their lives. So he's like, went to Falcone, he's like, just make this guy be quiet. And he didn't really realize, like talking to like a mobster, the bad guy who's obviously bad, he was like, use any means necessary. He's like, he's going to kill him. So he did that. But then he also set up that Gotham Renewal Fund, which after he died was essentially used as a front. It was essentially what his father did was create this perfect front, a charitable organization with no oversight that people were essentially using to launder money. All the criminal organizations, including the corrupt cops and the Maroni crime family and the Falcone operation, they were using the Gotham Renewal Fund essentially to launder all their money to do all their payouts and everything, right? So it's like this whole legacy of corruption, which Batman / Bruce Wayne isn't really connected to. It's not really wrestling with that a whole lot. And a couple scenes at the end. But again, like that would have been more compelling if you'd like at the beginning have that come out, and he's wrestling with that through the whole movie, and Andy Serkis, aka Gollum, aka Alfred, isn't there to answer his questions, and so he's like, it's boiling up with him through the whole movie, right? And then it's like that end scene is like create that tension. It's like, it's just weird. This is weird phenomena in modern blockbusters. We saw the same thing in Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, and I hesitate to compare these two movies because Rise of Skywalker is a terrible film and the Batman is not terrible. But there's the one scene in particular I'm thinking of, or one element I'm thinking of in particular in the narrative, where Chewbacca is seemingly killed on the shuttle that explodes, but in the very next scene, it's revealed that he was on a different shuttle and he's still alive. So it's like, they don't let that tension play out to the character's benefit or to the audience's benefit. The same thing here in the Batman, where like one scene, Batman finds out, oh, my dad may have done some pretty shady stuff. The next scene's like, Alfred Gollum is like, no, he was obviously the bad guy is bad and he was lying to you. And it's like, your father made some mistakes, but he's not bad. And it's like, oh, the tension's deflated immediately, or that tension's resolved immediately. But that tension should have been one of the driving tensions in that character through the whole film. Again, good, but not great. It's like frustratingly close to greatness.
Yeah. All right. So with all that, what are you landing on for your rating? And for our listeners, we rate movies out of 5 stars. The letterbox standard that also enables us to provide a heart, like a like for the film. So out of 5 stars and a possible heart, what do you land on the Batman?
So I gave the Batman a 3.5 out of 5. So it was definitely above average. It was a well-made movie, well acted, well shot, a little dark, but still well shot. But I also did give it the heart. Just because, listen, Batman is one of my favorite characters, superheroes to see on screen or to read about. So just being able to see a movie, especially for me, was the experience of being able to share that with my family, like me and my son being able to go and see a new Batman movie on the big screen. Listen, on a surface level, the Batman is really, really fun to watch. It's got some exciting scenes. Like, I know there's like a lot of detective work and a lot of, puzzling stuff out, but there's a lot of exciting action elements to this, like the Batmobile chase, and there's some fights going on with Batman and some thugs. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on. So to be able to watch a well-made Batman movie, A, on the big screen, B, with my family, and just see in general. Listen, I'm that's just always going to be, that's something special to me, to see that. So like, but the 3.5 out of 5 is just because like, there was like we've gone over again, like so much goodness in this movie. And it's almost like the movie was intent on tripping itself up. It's like, I'm going to be great here. It's like, nope, no, I'm not. Gotcha. So it's like, for me, it's like, yeah, it's really fun watch. Like tons of fun for me to watch this. I had a smile on my face, a grin on my face watching this on the big screen, almost the whole time. But really nothing below the surface level for me to dig into, which maybe over subsequent watches I'll rate it higher or lower, but like it's a solid 3.5 out of 5 for me, with the heart. So that extra kind of wow factor for Batman.
That's
how about you, Brian? What did you place this movie at?
Yeah, the first time I watched it, like heading out of the theater, I probably gave myself 24 hours to give it a rating, and I landed at 4.5 stars. I was walking out with a pretty big high on the film. I really enjoyed everything I saw. The 3-hour runtime was like no problem. Watching it again just over a month later, I knocked it down to 4 stars. There were a few things, and again, as I mentioned, I think at the beginning, is like maybe I was approaching this with a little bit of a critical eye on the second viewing, and I think some bad criticism is pretty fair to level against the film. I don't think it's not a 5-star Batman film. It's a really good Batman film. It's a lot of fun to watch. I am really looking forward to what they do next, and I kind of like this little mini Batman universe that they might build, and I like the characters. There's a lot to like about the movie. We've talked quite a bit about it, but go ahead.
Sorry. That being said, too, now that Matt Reeves has done the Planet of the Apes big budget movie, he's done Batman big budget movie, I really want him. I hope he's earned the capital to go and do his own thing.
Yeah.
And like, I want to see a Matt Reeves movie that's not a remake, it's not a sequel or prequel or reboot, something wholly original directed by Matt Reeves. I want to see what this guy can do with more of like a mid-budget thriller where he's not, or a mid-budget, not just thriller, but a mid-budget movie where he's not beholden to hit those kind of blockbuster superhero tropes and story beats and character beats, where he's free to tell a story in his own way. I think it would be really, really amazing to see what Matt Reeves is able to do next, now that he's got that kind of street cred in the Hollywood circles. I hope that he's able to leverage that and give us some of his own vision.
Without a doubt. And I think I know the answer to this question, but are you going to be buying this movie on home release, like a physical media release? We do collect movies quite a bit, and it's something we kind of neglect to talk about on the show. But what's your approach to collecting the Batman?
Yeah, I mean, this is an automatic pickup. It's a Batman movie. It's a well-made Batman movie. It's a movie that I enjoyed. And again, it's like, despite it feeling a little bit long on the second watch, it's still like, I want to get this thing back up on the screen again. I don't know when it's coming out, but this isn't one of those ones I'm going to wait for it to maybe go down in price too much. I want to have this in my collection as soon as possible.
Yeah, so that was kind of my approach to buying this movie, is that I ended up pre-ordering one of these steelbook copies that are somewhat limited edition. It was one of those things where normally I'd want to wait for a movie to come down in price to, $15, $20 because they come out at $35. And I say, you know what, this is 100% a movie that I'm going to watch many, many times over the next decade. I'm going to pick up the little bit of expanded packaging with the steelbook. So I'd put that pre-order in, and I'm looking forward to seeing it in all its 4K glory. I mean, we're watching the stream of it online, and it's like, the physical media should be a tick above it in quality. I'm looking forward to it. And honestly, I'm sitting and thinking about it. I don't think there's a single Batman movie that I don't own on physical media, aside from a few of the animated movies, because there's a lot of animated movies, right? All the live action movies are in my collection.
Yeah, I'm missing the Joel Schumacher movies. Not because I hate them, but just because I haven't gotten around. I think I was going to pick them up on Blu-ray, but then I think there's 4K releases now. I was kind of playing the waiting game to see if they would come down in price a little bit.
And they look amazing in 4K.
Yes, I kind of figured like those. That's the thing. Like 4K is really great for those big budget action movies because that's where you're gonna get the payoffs for that, right?
That's a wrap on another episode of the Real Film Chronicles podcast. Thank you for listening and hanging out with us today. We really appreciate your support and look forward to you joining us for the next episode. We can be found around the internet and social media, with our home base being realfilmchronicles.com, which will have all the links you need to follow and keep in touch with us. Until next time, take care of yourself and others, and keep your film journey going.
This guy over here. Hey, I'm the penguin over here.